G'day, Ed. How you doing, mate?
Living the dream, Robbie. How you doing, buddy?
I'm awesome, man. I'm awesome. I'm excited about today's show. There's a lot going on. There's some funny Russian humor going on in the background, and I can't wait to get into today's show. What's new in your world, mate? What's happening? Is the weather warming up? Is it turning into summer in that part of the world?
It is warming up, actually. Not that I've been able to enjoy it. I spent the entire 24 hours since our last show working on today's show. So,
it's funny. I spent a large percentage of my day scouring the news. I was watching a podcast with Patrick Bet-David and Tim Pool the other day, and it was really interesting because Tim Pool left school when he was 14. He just didn't fit in at school, and it didn't work for him or anything like that. And he decided that, he was coding websites, he was building things in Flash, and he decided that he wanted to be a journalist, and he became an activist, and he was doing all these things, right? So one of the key thing that he sent in there that really kind of resonated with me, he goes, not many people spend the vast majority of their day scouring the news, trying to bring this thing together to try and get you the truth and trying to tell you the truth behind what's going on. And I thought, actually, I'm one of your bros. You're my peeps right there. And I thought, I do spend a large percentage of my day reading the news and looking at what's going on and stuff like that. And every now and then I catch myself and say, what are you doing that for? Doesn't make any difference in your life. Why does that actually matter? And then, I think, well, if I'm drawn to those things and it's not hurting anybody, like what could be worse? I'm not at the pub drinking beer with my mates and womanizing and carrying on. It's not so bad, is it?
Nope. That's a good way to put it. Yeah, that's true. I could be doing a lot worse things with my time. I don't have to be doing any of this stuff anyway, but I choose to do it. So I can't, as much as I would love to complain, I can't, no one's making me do it. Right. So, but I think it is useful to let people know that, when we come on camera, we're not just making this stuff up. We put work into it. We put research into this stuff. So I don't want people to think that we're just winging it. We do our research, and
I'm sitting at my desk here all day long, looking at these things, doing this stuff. And now, like, when my missus looks over at me, she's just kind of over in the other corner there. She's like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "Working." Whereas before we press the record button, I was just looking. Before I'm just looking, but now I'm working. So
right.
It feels like a natural extension for me as well. And I kind of raised that because I want to do some more philosophical stuff with you. We do a lot of geopolitics and a lot of news and a lot of reporting and things like that. But I want to take the traditional podcasting route with you as well. And I wanted to spring this on you a bit and start today. And I want to kick off today's show by just asking you the quintessential podcasting question, if I may, Ed. Is that okay?
Sure. Bring it on.
All right, you ready? We're going to go deep straight away. It's all right. It's like 5:30 in the morning here for me, so I'm good. Like, I'm awake and bright-eyed, bushy-tailed. The quintessential podcasting question is: if you could go back and visit with your 17 or 18-year-old self, what advice would you give to yourself?
Well, first, take a business class. Because in college I was all liberal arts. I wanted to study history and the loftier thoughts of the world, and I am glad. I don't really have regrets doing that, but I was kind of I don't know. I had rose-colored glasses on. I was going to study Aristotle. One of my majors in college was ancient Greek, so that I could read Aristotle in ancient Greek. So which I enjoyed. But the idea of learning how to make money, it bored me. I didn't. The idea of but then when I got married, and,
it became the mission priority.
yeah, that's right. But no, if I go back, I would say travel more. Now, I did travel a lot as a young man. After college, I took off and went to Italy. I went to Japan, and I lived in Italy for a while. I guess I'd say do more traveling. When I got to Japan, I parked myself there for about 6 years. Maybe throw in a few more countries. So maybe there were a couple of girls in Italy who winked at me that I didn't ask out. I'd like to go back and follow up on that. In a lot of ways, I was a naive kid when I was traveling, right? And knowing what I know now, holy cow, that cute girl was winking at me. Why the heck didn't you do anything? So maybe, follow up on a few of those missed opportunities.
So you travel more, take a business class, and follow up on missed opportunities. There it is, ladies and gentlemen. That's the way to start the podcast today. That's some great advice. I think we should play with that a little bit, Ed, and ask each other some podcasting questions like that to help the audience get to know us a little bit. But let's leave that behind for now. Today on The Unspoken Truth, and ladies and gentlemen, if this is your first time here, welcome. It's great to have you here. Ed and I talk about the current geopolitics situations in various parts of the world. We'd like to pull back the curtain and show you what's going on behind the narrative. And on today's show, we're going to be talking about, again, the financial system. More banks are set to go under. What the hell is going on, Ed? This is just an unbelievably crazy time in human history. I'm going to give you a quick update on the war in the Ukraine. I'm not going to harp on that too much because not a lot's going on. We're building to the counteroffensive, and it feels like it's building to a crescendo. It's going to talk about weaponized immigration, and I'm going to juxtapose that, what's happening in the United States, with what's going on here as well, because it's happening legally here in Australia, but albeit for a different reason, and maybe not such a bad thing when I give you my perspective on it as well. And we'll round out the show today. I've got a report for you on child slavery in the Congo as it relates to battery technology, because that's where all the cobalt that goes in the batteries that we use comes from, and how Australia is using child slaves to meet its net zero targets. But they failed to tell you that child slavery is part of the net zero equation. So I'm really excited to be bringing that to you as well, because that's something that's been bothering me for quite some time. All of these politicians bother the hell out of me, and I feel like I'm in a helpless position. But now that I've got a microphone and I've got a camera, I can do something and I get it off my chest, and I just feel better about it. When they say that, men don't talk about their feelings, they don't talk about how they feel about things, that's 100% right in my case. I fit in that typical exact stereotype, and I bottle these feelings that I have up inside of me, and it's not until I get them out that I feel better. And when I get out there and I realized I have a theme song. It was in the gym the other day, and it just resonated with me, and I'm kind of meandering here a little bit, but just bear with me. I'll get to the point. I was listening to Rage Against the Machine, and there's that famous song, he's saying, "Fuck you, or go and do what you tell me." And then I was listening to it, and I'm just doing bench press to this thing, 100 kilo bench press, and just going for it. And, at the end of my workout, and I racked it, and I was like, man, that's it. I'm finished. I'm done. And then the song is kind of going up and down like this. And I thought to myself, the name of that band, kind of embodies actually how I feel. It's like raging against the machine. And if you don't have an outlet to get that out, meaning a verbal and an oral outlet to get that out, or to surround yourself with other people that feel the same way, you end up like the people in that song, just screaming down a microphone and carrying on. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you're watching this and you're feeling like there's some lightning bottled within inside of you, it's like lightning in a bottle just wants to come out, make sure you get yourself a creative outlet. And to do that, because I think it's a really important thing to do. I think it's a really it's actually a fun thing to do, to find some friends that want to share all that stuff with you as well. So thank you, Ed, for coming on this journey and allowing me to be so vocal about all of the things that I want to talk about. I appreciate you, man.
I'm happy to be your personal therapist.
I knew there was going to be a smart ass comment in there. I knew it, man. I knew it. I've got to get a ribbing here for wearing my heart on the sleeve a little bit, but
that's coming. Game. Yeah.
That's fair game. What have you got for us today, mate? You've got some more banks that are set to go under. I can't believe it. When you sent that message to me about what you wanted to talk about, I was like, really? More already? It's only been a couple of days since the last one. What the hell?
Oh, look, I'm looking forward to the day when I don't have to talk about this anymore, this topic. And I'm sure that your audience is probably getting tired of it too. But, and I wouldn't be talking about today if there weren't a new development. And, I feel a sense of responsibility to keep people appraised on what's going on so that they're prepared. So this is important stuff. I can't tell you. Look, I think that we are coming up on a life-changing period of time here. I mean, literally, I can't diminish that thought. I can't emphasize that enough. That this could be huge, honest to God, or what's going to happen here to us in our economy and in our lives could be on par with what happened in the Great Depression. Now, it might not happen. I hope it doesn't happen. Look, this is one of the times when I hope that I'm wrong. But listen, preparing for that, there's no downside in preparing for it. If it doesn't happen, cool. But the steps that we are telling people to take doesn't set you back at all. On the other hand, if it does play out, this way, I want people to be prepared so that they at least minimize their suffering. If not, maybe even actually benefit from it. So this is such important stuff to know about and to be aware of. So that's why I keep bringing it up. So should I dive right in?
Yeah, before you throw to that, I just want to kind of comment on what you're saying there. I was watching Nate at Canadian Prepper yesterday. If you haven't seen that channel, folks, I'll put the link down in the description. You should check out Nate. He does a daily dose of some doom and gloom, goes around the map and shows you what's going on in the world. But he's also a hardcore prepper at heart. And one of the things that he was saying yesterday is that you're underestimating how bad the changes that we're about to experience are going to be. And not a lot of people are sounding the alarm on that. You've been sounding the alarm on that for a while. You and I have been talking about this stuff for a couple of years now. And all the things that we've been talking about have come to pass. And it's unfolding. The problem is you have this normalcy bias where you're used to banks going under, you're used to these things happening. But if you rewind the clock 5 years ago, there's no such thing as banks going broke. There's no such thing as a war in Europe or on the precipice of a nuclear exchange or the last throw of the dice in a war before NATO engages with Russia. It's like these things have just become normal to us. And this normalcy bias creates optimism bias. And optimism bias thinks that we're looking towards all the good in things all the time, and that stops us from preparing. And the way Nate describes it is you've got to get ready while the getting is good.
Yeah.
And that's right now. Yeah. You say it all the time. You created a little mantra for the channel for us, Ed, where you've got to get your money out of the bank, reduce your exposure, buy some gold and silver, and create some passive recurring income. Because if inflation strikes, the economy crashes, the stock market goes away, or war happens, and all 3 or 4 of those things happen simultaneously, we're in big trouble, really, really big trouble. And if a nuclear exchange happens in Europe, we'll see worldwide panic like you've never seen before at a scale that you've never seen before. And if you've got 3 months worth of food and 12 months worth of toilet paper, you'll be okay. But the reality is that when you're trying to actually do something like that, it's going to, while that's actually unfolding in real time in front of you, that's going to be something that's really, really difficult for you to deal with. So do the preparation and get while the getting is good before this thing bites us all on the ass. It's going to be a pretty serious time. So with that, Ed, let me jump out of the stream, mate, and I'll hand over to you. And why don't you share your first little segment with us? Go.
All right, let's go. A bombshell report from the Federal Reserve just revealed the real fragility behind the banking system, but nobody is covering this in the mainstream media. But I'm going to cover it for you right here. So let's talk about it.
One eternity later.
Okay, so about 6 weeks ago now, the general public was surprised at the development that happened at SVB Bank and at Signature Bank and at First Republic Bank. Well, apparently, the Federal Reserve was not surprised. They just released a report that nobody is talking about, but I want you to know about it because it is scary stuff. So this is what the report did, and this is just out over the past couple of days. And the report says this: at third quarter end, 722 banks reported unrealized losses exceeding 50% of their capital. Now remember, this is the third quarter of last year. So the Federal Reserve knew this last year. And they didn't do anything for SVB Bank. They didn't anticipate, they didn't step in to help. So according to this report, as of the third quarter of last year, and things have only gotten worse since then, 722 banks were essentially insolvent. If there were to be any kind of a run on those banks, boom, they're done. They're out of business. So this just reinforces everything that we have been warning you about. So what is the Federal Reserve doing about this? You would think that they would want to head this off at the pass, right? So let's take a look at what they're doing. So this is the Federal Reserve's brilliant plan to protect the financial system. For banks less than $100 billion, they're going to do enhanced monitoring of banks, and they're going to conduct targeted examinations, and they're going to expand follow-up at the banks. So basically what they're saying is we're going to keep a close eye on them. That's it. That's the extent of their plan. And for banks that are greater than $100 billion, they're going to utilize existing on-site horizontal supervisory programs to monitor the firm's exposure to interest rate increases. So, so what they're going to do is they're going to park actual people inside of the banks, right? They're going to, I don't know, give them a corner office at these banks and monitor things. So they're monitoring stuff. Listen, this report and their plan to address these issues, it is a joke. I mean, can we see that this is a government operation? So I did a video recently where I compared the 2008 financial crisis with what's going on right now in the banks. And I think I did a pretty good job summarizing the current state of our banks compared to back then. So please bear with me, allow me to play a few second clip of my own video. Okay, so I'm here to tell you the truth. I'm going to tell you things that you're not going to hear in the mainstream media. With every bank that has gone under, we've had 3 American banks go under, right? Not to mention Credit Suisse that went under. In every case, the talking heads were on TV telling you that everything's fine, nothing to worry about. It was a one-off event and we are good. Well, I'm going to tell you the truth. This is just the beginning. This is going to make 2007, 2008, 2009 look like a picnic. Let me give you some unfun facts. In 2007, 25 banks failed for a total of $526 billion. Well, in the last 6 weeks alone, we've had 3 major bank failures, and we're already at $532 billion. So with just those 3 banks, we are already $6 billion over the entire amount of 25 banks that went under in 2007. So at 3 banks, we've already outpaced 25 banks back then. And of course, as I mentioned, the bank stock index has lost 50% of its value in the past 2 months. And this is not over. This is a full... Okay, so quoting myself, this is not over. Start paying attention if you haven't been. Reduce your exposure to your bank, put some of your money into gold and silver, and establish streams of passive recurring income. Okay, so that's my little update for the day on the banking industry. All right, so can you believe that this is not being covered basically at all in the mainstream media? Not even on the business channels, you know, the market channels. They didn't cover it. That stats I just gave about 500 and something billion dollars already being lost within 3 banks versus we've exceeded the 2008 level. 2008, that was a big financial disaster.
Ed, once again, mate. Once again, man, I'm so glad I know you, and I'm so glad that you're in my circle of influence because you have such a wonderful way of bringing this to bear. And as I'm listening to you there, I'm thinking, there's a YouTube short. There's another one. There's another one. There's another one. And then I check myself, right? Like, why am I thinking about creating content while I'm listening to you? And the reason is because I'm trying to wake you up. Right? If I feel like Grandpa Simpson, like with my hands around Homer's neck, or Homer with his hands around Bart's neck, like wake up, listen, like one eternity later, and it's not an eternity. It's literally just like moments later. You say another fact and another thing there. I was just writing some numbers down there as I was watching there. So as you said, 722 banks from their report. A quick Google search shows me there's 4,844 banks in America. So that means 14% of the banks in America are technically insolvent, which means they have those unrealized losses, which means here in Australia, if you're trading while you have unrealized losses, but those realized losses will come home to roost for you in this financial year, you're trading while you're insolvent, which means you're supplying services to people and taking money off people, and you may not be able to continue to supply those services to people while you're taking money off them, which is illegal. So you're not allowed to trade while you're insolvent. So technically they're not insolvent because they're unrealized losses, but the real reason they're unrealized losses is because the interest rates are going up and the bond yield is going down. So that inverse relationship there causes that to be a non-starter there. So they haven't technically become insolvent, but they are insolvent is what it actually means. Because if they cash it all in, it's game over. Then you said $526 billion over 25 banks, but $532 billion losses over 3 banks. So when you divide 532 divided by 3, because there's 3 banks, it's on average 177 billion each. So if we take 177 times 100, so listen to my numbers, man. 177 billion times 722 banks, if they all go broke, because they're all broke, and that happens, that's $128 trillion. Like there was not enough zeros in the calculator there to count it. So I had to remove the billions from the calculator and just use those numbers. Literally 128 trillion. That will destroy the US economy. That will destroy the world's economy if that happens, because there's no way to recover from something like that. And that's why, you know, the best I can really do for you is probably a nuclear war. That's probably the best we can do. Because it's the same thing, right? It's an apocalypse.
That'd be the ultimate reset.
Yeah. the ultimate reset of absolutely everything. It is. What are you thinking when you're here? Let me go back into podcasting mode for a second. What are you thinking when you're pulling these numbers together? Because you're like, why aren't people seeing this? Really? Is this like true? You're not like that, you know, not some sort of financial savant. You're just a dude reading the news.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's what's going through my mind. I shake my head, and well, first I have a moment of self-doubt. Well, wait a minute. This can't be right. I mean, why isn't this not being talked? Why is this not being talked about? So I got to be wrong. So I'll go back and double check. So yes, the question is, why isn't this being made a big deal? Why isn't it?
I think I know. So yesterday, when I created the video that I'll show at the end of the show today about cobalt, I used a piece of someone else's content in my video. And normally when I would do something like that, if I get a copyright strike on the channel, I'd just leave it. If it says your video can't be monetized, doesn't matter, whatever, just put it in there. But it says you can't be monetized and it can't be shown. So essentially what YouTube is saying to me is you can't use that part of the video. Do you want me to cut it out for you? So I just deleted the video, deleted it back in DaVinci Resolve, and I just re-uploaded it without that slice, and it was no drums, right? So and then yesterday when I was filming, I set up all my gear. I was ready to go. My gear was facing the other way. It was here, right? So I had to move all my stuff out of the way, put the camera there, and I'm ready to go. And I typed my little script and put it on the teleprompter. I'm all set, ready to go, and look at the camera. I'm good. And I sit down and I press record here, and I'm recording, and I get back up to stop the camera, and I forgot to press the record button. So I did the whole script without pressing record. Anyway, I was like, that was a shit take anyway. I sat back down, pressed the record button this time. I stood there and watched it, came and sat back down. And then I pulled the card out of the camera, put it in the computer, and it was all out of focus. And I'm like, oh, that was a shit take anyway. I put it back in there. Third time's a charm. Got it. Third time, right? And then I finished editing, and, you know, I've been up since 4 o'clock in the morning, and this is like 5:30 in the afternoon. I'm like fading, and every little thing is just grinding my gears, you know, like making me crazy. Anyway, I completely finished. I upload to YouTube, and then I get the copyright strike, and I go, after all that, I get a copyright strike. And this is the reason why no one's talking about it. And Susie's in the kitchen making dinner just like next to me here. And she goes, what's wrong? And I said, I got a copyright strike. And she goes, yeah, that's because she goes, I've been listening to you all afternoon. And that's because they don't want anybody to know what you're talking about. If you can discover that content on that channel that you were using, that content that you were using, fine, that's fair game. But if you're taking that person's content and amplifying it, the algorithm would go, no, you don't. You're not doing that. And it's not because of copyright, because I tried some copyright of some of the person's content elsewhere, because this person was promoting his book and he's talking about cobalt and he's talking about child slaves and all of this massive abuse, right? But he's doing it across probably I had a choice of 30 different podcasts I could choose from to take out the key points from what he was saying. Couldn't use any of it. And so it's the same reason, right? If the dude comes to my show and I interview him, yeah, sure, it's fair game. I can do that because it's legit. But if I'm trying to copy or I'm trying to use somebody else's content using his message, no, you don't. And it's not because copyright of YouTube, it's because of the algorithm in YouTube says, no, you don't. You're not to talk about child slave labor and cobalt in the Congo. You're not to talk about that in any way, shape, or form. If you create that content, no problems, no copyright. But if you're trying to amplify someone else's content, because that's how stuff goes viral, right? You're not allowed to do that. We're not having it. And I think that that's what's happening there for you. Because if people truly knew the scale of destruction that is about to happen in your economy, they would be like, I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, well, there might be something to that because I've had channels, but I've done videos where, and you showed me once on, off camera, where it's happened to you, where the views will go up, then stop, and they go sideways, and
just stops completely.
Die. So apparently,
I'll let you loose on the YouTube world. No. You're not talking about that at all, ever. No.
Yeah. So, but listen. You're talking to a guy who's amazed that anybody listens to him at all. So, so I'm pretty humble that way. I'm pretty easy to please that way. But I do know that I've affected a lot of people's lives. People have reached out to me via email or in the chat, saying they really appreciate it. And some people took steps that really put them in a better position. That's a very gratifying feeling, but circling back to there are so many landmines out there, any one of which can be catastrophic. You've heard me talk before about these derivatives that nobody talks about. The derivatives exposure by these banks. The top 5 banks have 125 trillion dollars of derivatives exposure
with a T, baby.
Yeah,
not a B, a T.
Yeah,
a T is 1,000 billion.
And these are leveraged products, right? And derivatives are essentially a bet on interest rates, right? So one bad day in the derivatives market, and the entire banking industry is wiped out. So that's not a good position. That's not a warm, fuzzy feeling to be in, knowing that just one bad day and boom, you're cooked. But you will never hear anybody talk about those. The commercial mortgage-backed security issue that I mentioned the other day, that is going to be a massive issue that nobody is talking about. But trust me, the same thing happened in 2008. People got a very quick education in mortgage-backed securities because they caused the crisis. After a couple of weeks, everyone was an expert in mortgage-backed securities. Well, the next big lesson is going to be commercial mortgage-backed security. That's going to be the next big buzzword at the water coolers.
All right, let's round out this this little segment here. I want to sum it up by saying it feels like a Netflix crime show, and I feel like you're the FBI agent, and you've got the guy in the interrogation room, and he's sitting across to you with his arms folded like he's done nothing wrong, and I'm not going to say anything. I've got rights. I can do anything. But you're kind of looking over at the table at him and saying, listen, man, the game is up. I see what's going on. It doesn't matter if you confess or not. It doesn't matter if you tell me about your crimes or not. The game is up. And we know that this is actually going to go away, and this is going to cause all sorts of problems for you. So well done on sounding the alarm there, mate. I think we need to get you a foghorn or some sort of amplifying device. So, people are not listening on YouTube. You can go and shout it out in your local community.
Just hit the sign up button. Just hit the subscribe button here, and I'll be happy.
Awesome. That'll do the trick. All right, let's shift gears, folks. Let me give you a little update on what's going on in the war in Ukraine. Let me share my entire screen, that screen there. And let's have a little checkers of what's going on the map, which is pretty interesting for a couple of days now, maybe a week or so now. It looks like the Ukrainians, that is, have pushed across the river in the south from Kherson here, and they're now holding the ground here in the muddy, swampy area. The Russians have been using aviation to attack the Ukrainians there, but it doesn't seem to be going well. And there seems to be a whole lot of footage coming out now as well of Ukrainian troops being able to get across the river here. So they're going to get across in scale, and I think one of the attack vectors is going to be there in the south in Kherson, and the other attack vector is going to be up here from Zaporizhia. They're going to go to Melitopol here and cut them off. That's what they're going to do. Even though the Russians are dug in here extensively, I think concentrating the forces and the troops down in this part of the world will be the way that it actually happens. And they'll have a pincer movement that comes across here to cut off Crimea. And in the process, they'll take out the bridge. So that's looking more and more likely on a daily basis. Over here in the eastern part of Ukraine, of course, we have the ongoing battle over here in Bakhmut to the north. I just can't scroll in with my mouse wheel because it goes nuts for some reason here on this map. You can see the Wagner forces have taken just about all of the town now as well. So we're on the very western edge of the town here. And if you look at the timeline of what's going on, folks, if you want to see this map, it's just at deepstatemap.live. I'll put the link in the description for you as well. There's a lot of information on this map. You can go back a couple of days like this by just clicking on their tools. You can see they're just etching along just ever so slightly, just holding the ground. Urban combat is the single hardest thing you could do as an infantry soldier. Usually works on a 10-to-1 ratio, meaning the attacking force will need 10 people for every one defender there. And the attacking force will generally lose 5 to 6 people for every one person loss on the defending side. In urban combat, it's the most difficult, intensive type of logistics operation you can do as well. That's why this logistics war has been such a big thing. And the crossroads here at Kromatov has been a problem for the Ukrainians for some time. But now the ground has hardened a little bit. They're able to kind of make their way back to Chasiv Yar here. I doubt that the Russians are going to get much further here because there's quite a bit of high ground here. So that's going to be a bit of a non-starter for the Russians there. But it's estimated now that more than 100,000 Russian troops have been killed and destroyed here in Bakhmut, trying to take this little one-horse town, which just seems absolutely crazy to me. There's been rumors as well for a little while now that the Ukrainians were going to attract Belgorod here. They were going to put their offensive forces, roll across the border into Russia, for heaven's sake, and take the ground here, and then hold that hostage until you get the hell out of Crimea. Then we'll give you that back and then make it happen that way. But I think that's a bit of propaganda that's going on there. It's a bit interesting scenario to see what's happening. My view is that if you've got 100,000 odd troops, it's going to be very, very hard to hide those troops and to hide all of the equipment associated with the troops in the open. So moving it to the north of the country there is not likely, but hiding the troops and equipment down here and over here in Zaporizhia will be relatively straightforward. And you're outside the ranges of Russian Su-25 attack aircraft and from their armored brigades as well, because a lot of their armor had been destroyed in this part of the world. So I think the counterattack is on the verge of happening down here in Kherson, down here in Zaporizhia. They're going to come down here to the middle and cut them off. If you don't know, the Zaporizhia power plant, folks, is right here in the guts, just here. That's where the power plant is. We now know that the Russians have, from images that we've seen, and it's not propaganda, we see Russian troops and equipment on the roof of the power plants. So it's unbelievable. There's these, there's 7 buildings and they've got troops and equipment on the top there. So the Russians are planning to lob artillery or mortars or shooting from those places at the advancing Ukrainian troops. And it doesn't make any sense that they would do something like that, because they're just going to have a drone flown into their face and that will make that all go away in an asymmetric warfare type scenario. So we're on the verge in the next couple of days of this all coming to a giant crescendo and something big happening. If Putin loses Crimea, then he will lose all of Russia. I think the whole thing will come undone. This bridge is going to go away. They're going to divide them in two. And I think maybe once that happens, what we're going to see is a capitulation of the Ukrainians, letting this go to the Russians. And maybe some of this, maybe we get Mariupol back and we come to this line where we were. You know, the conditions that the Ukrainians have said for the end of the war is all Russians to leave. pre-2014 borders, which means all of this red stuff goes away. But that's not going to happen, and I think maybe they might end up giving up this ground and this happening here. This is the last throw of the dice, folks. If something doesn't go quite right here with the Ukrainian counteroffensive, I think what will happen is some desperate things will happen from the Ukrainian side to try and draw NATO into the war, which is pretty scary. So the combat losses for the Russians continue to mount. I haven't done one of these for a little while, but you can see just yesterday, more than 650 troops were either killed or wounded in action from the Russian side. I don't know how true any of this is. Take it with a grain of salt because it's published by the Ukrainians and they've been publishing this from the start. And what they're trying to do is to show you, they're going to try and show you what this is actually costing the Russians and what a ridiculous thing it actually is. Overnight, there was a series of missile strikes fired at Ukrainian. In total, there was 23 missiles fired and 2 of them got through. So the air defense system is working incredibly well there for the Ukrainians. 2 got through, but not a bad result, I have to say. And I don't think anybody was hurt or killed or injured as a result of those airstrikes yesterday. But imagine living in a country and there was 23 cruise missiles fired at you. That's a pretty scary proposition and a pretty serious thing. So personnel losses there, we're approaching 200,000 people. All of the armored combat vehicles, 7,000, 3,700 tanks, 3,000 artillery pieces, 300 aircraft, that's more than the Australian Air Force, 294 helicopters, that's more than the entire Australian Defence Force, and 18 ships and boats, and more of that's going to happen. I just want to draw your attention to this figure here for a second. So 3,734 tanks destroyed. Yesterday was the May Day parade in Russia, where they celebrate a victory day in Europe, where the Soviets took back Europe from the Nazis. And normally what they would have is this T-34 tank here being flanked by all of the other Russian tanks and armored equipment. So I'm just going to play this video just for a second, just to show you that there's virtually no equipment on display. And, you know, there's one reason or another. They're at war. That's the first thing. But they have this one tank, which is normally flanked by the T-14 Armadas, the T-90s, the T-80s. But there's nothing else there. There's literally no equipment that comes onto this parade ground in front of all of these people. Traditionally, we're seeing everything. We're seeing everything that the Russian military has, their entire arsenals, their everything. But we're not seeing hardly anything. And the reason I hypothesize is it's either in combat or it's been destroyed here in a place like this. So it's a funny thing that's going on there in Russia. And I also look at the speech that Putin put out on his May Day parade. You know, it's normally very historical, and he talks about how, you know, people fought for the mother country and blah, 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 usually. So I can sum up Putin's speech like this: the Nazi invaders, blah, 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 Nazi invaders, blah, blah, blah. He's calling everybody Nazis, and I'm just scratching my head going, what in earth, what is he talking about? What is he talking about? If there's evidence to say that they're Nazis, well, show us. You know, yeah, all right, you showed us a couple of guys with a few tattoos and stuff like that, but so there's plenty of people in Australia with that type of symbology and that type of those types of tattoos as well. But it doesn't mean that they hold that fascist ideology from 80 years ago. It just seems so stupid, and I feel like he's just clutching at some strange historical reference that has it just doesn't have any precedence in the modern day and age, because the people that experienced all that fascism and Nazism and all of the bad stuff that went with that are long dead, and it hasn't been passed down to anybody, and nobody is perpetrating that. Sure, if people have ideologies and beliefs in and around those things, sure, maybe I'll accept that. But Putin has never provided any evidence to any of that, other than a couple of soldiers with a few different tattoos. But so what? I could show you some people down the road here in Cronulla with tattoos that don't actually conform with what would be considered to be politically correct today. And I could show you probably more people in this suburb where I live that wouldn't be politically correct in the eyes of the Russian president. So it seems like such a strange thing to try and be leveraging, like he's protecting his society from the evil fascist invaders that are coming from Germany. It's like, what on earth are you talking about, man? It's like really strange. What do you think, Ed?
Well, I don't think that he wrote his speech for your consumption. I think.
Hey, cut it out. He's writing it for me as the pundit and the analyst.
How can I convince Rob Russ?
How can I convince Rob and Cronulla that there are Nazis here in Russia?
No, obviously he was speaking to his people, right? And he was giving out the message that he wanted his people to hear. So obviously he thought that message would resonate with the people. Now, I'm guessing that, look, I think the Russians felt the sting of Nazism more than any other country. I think you could argue that, right? So for them, Nazi probably has a special meaning to them than it does to us. So that's probably why he throws it in. So, but I've got a question circling back to your commentary on Ukraine. So I saw a couple of videos recently. One was of a huge crowd of mothers protesting in Kyiv, protesting Zelensky's policy of what's the word I'm thinking? Not indoctrination. Bringing conscription. Thank you, conscription. And then in another video, they show a student at a university being drug out by soldiers because he's being.
I saw that. He's like laying on the ground, just resisting, and he's like being dragged like a get here, you're going no matter what. He's like, "Fuck you, I'm not going anywhere, man." And if you make me go, you're gonna have to dress me, you're gonna have to wipe my ass and everything.
Yeah, yeah. So I gotta wonder: is this a sign that they're running out of bodies? And if so,
listen, mate, mainstream media is never ever going to tell you that they are. It's the last straw of the dice. And that's my concern, right? Is there's not that many people in Ukraine that are able to fight. We had this conversation yesterday that 80% of Americans that are squarely in the slot, the age bracket to go fight, can't fight because they can't meet the fitness standard.
Yep.
And Susie's like, I think I've mentioned to you before, like I'll take a photo of my hands all torn up from doing chin-ups and, doing stupid, crazy fitness stuff. She's like, what are you training for? And I'm like, everything. So they call me up, man. I'm going to go. I have to go, But then as soon as I say that, I feel Andrew Tate inside of me going, "What are you doing, man? Why would you do anything that any of those people say?"
Yeah.
It's true. No, so, I think, man, that conscription thing is real, and those mothers protesting that, and there's laws and rules around that. If you're at university, then you can't be conscripted because you need to go and finish your education because you're going to form an important piece of Ukrainian society once this war is over. And I think, in those mothers' defense, they're 100% right. But when you look at the military aspect and the logistics and the numbers of people that they need, what do you do, man? Like, it's very scary.
I keep coming back to what would victory look like for Ukraine, and what would it look like for for the Russians? So I'm going to ask you a podcasting question here. So I want your opinion. So put yourself in that rat's nest of a mind of Mr. Putin's and try to see it from his perspective. What do you think he could settle for what would be a victory for him? Did they need the entire country, or would he settle for Kyiv and everything east of the Dnieper River? What do you think looks like victory to Vladimir?
Yeah, it's a good question. If I would be controversial, and I'll tell you the unspoken truth of what I think victory looks like everything all the way to Portugal. The entire European continent. Like that's what I feel like he wants. And when you read the history of his comments and you read Putin's playbook and you read their doctrine and you read everything to go with the way they're behaving, and the way they're behaving is that they see it as Eurasia. They don't see it as Europe. And Eurasia meaning from Vladivostok all the way on the right-hand side of the map to Portugal all the way on the left-hand side of the map. That's what they see. And when you look at what the Ukrainians are doing in terms of massing forces, massing troops, concentrating forces and everything like that, I believe we're going to see more military combat action in the next couple of weeks than we've ever seen in human history. I think it'll be more than you've ever seen. It'll be more than World War II, more than World War I, and it will be the most destructive, catastrophic thing that we could ever possibly imagine. And I think the Ukrainians are going to take some wins, but they're also going to take some severe losses as well. And I think the Russians are going to be forced into a corner. And this is the problem with all of it. It's, we talk about prepping before, financially prepping, but also physically, mentally, spiritually, you need to prep yourself as well. And in your mind, you have to be ready for the worst case scenario, because in every scenario for the last 50 years, when we play the Russian side in a NATO exercise, we lose because it ends in a nuclear exchange. The Russian Navy is largely unaffected. The Russian submarine force is largely unaffected from anything that's been going on. And they're sniffing around Norway. They're sniffing around all the pipelines there, all of the internet cables, the undersea stuff that's over there. And if that starts to get systematically switched off, we will enter the new phase of this war. Remember the space cyber EMP doctrine that they have. And I think we're not very far away from that actually happening, them turning off our eyes and ears in space. Massive cyber attacks on a scale that you could never possibly imagine, when they cash in all the 0 days that they've got ready to go. And then a giant EMP strike over Europe, which turns off all the lights. And then now the Russians are like, okay, now do you want to negotiate, or do you just want us to keep moving forward? Their ability to outsuffer us is far in excess than what we could ever possibly hope to imagine. For the reason you said, in World War II, they lost 20 million people, man.
Yeah. The Russians are famous, ironically, for the misery that they have endured throughout history.
It's awful,
right?
Yeah.
Right. They've got a deep history with being miserable, with misery. So I think, they've got a higher tolerance for it than we in the West do. I think we're very soft compared to the average Russian. The average Russian, they're used to living on $400 or $500 a month for a family of four, and they share an apartment with another family. That's Russian life. They know how to make the most out of a little bit of food. They're well practiced at surviving miserable conditions. We're not. The West, as a rule, is not. So that's a philosophical. I don't know. I don't know whether that's just a theory of mine.
I think you're right. If you go to YouTube and look at documentaries from the 1980s, like it's horrendous, man. It's hard to believe that those people live in those cold climates and have nothing, they have no heating, they have all this, like, tough as nails, man. How hard they are and what they have to endure. But that doesn't mean they're smart, and that doesn't mean that they value human life, because we've seen in the last couple of months that they don't value human life. There's a couple of videos I put onto Telegram just the other day that show you the war crimes that they've perpetrated and committed. And there's a couple of other, there's a video of the boss of Wagner going around talking about, he's like standing in front of 30 dead bodies going, look, the blood is still warm. And the reason these guys are dead is because you're not sending the ammunition to me that I actually need. And well, if you're not getting the ammunition that you need and you don't have what you want, why are you sending those people into the fray? Like, what are you doing? Like, they're human lives, right? Like, but they don't place any value on human lives. They might be tough as nails, but they're dumb as a box of rocks all in the same time. So, that's a very, very scary proposition. I want to close out this little segment here by reminding you, ladies and gentlemen of the audience, that if you're going to go down this rabbit hole of the war in Ukraine, you're going to go and investigate what's actually going on, and you're going to go and seek information, I recommend that you do that via Telegram. Don't bother with YouTube, because the information on YouTube is completely censored and controlled, and the narrative is completely controlled. What you need to do is to go onto Telegram and find those things. Just search on Telegram. Just search Google for Telegram channels about the war, and you'll find the things that resonate to you. But beware, ladies and gentlemen, that it's a deep, dark rabbit hole, and it will affect you. You can't look at war, you can't see these things and have it not affect you. So just be careful if you're going down that rabbit hole. If you want the censored version, just listen to us here on The Unspoken Truth, or watch it on YouTube, or watch it on mainstream media. They'll give you the censored version. But the problem with the censored version, you don't need to see all of that stuff. But what they do in the censored version is they drive you towards a narrative which is not true. And the narrative is fake. One of the things, and last point on this before we throw to the immigration topic, was Zelensky came out, and traditionally the May Day parade is May 9th, right? That's Victory Day in Europe. That's what it's considered. But Zelensky came out today and said, we're changing that to May 8th. So we've seen in the last couple of years what side of politics goes away and tries to rewrite history. Sorry, Vladimir Zelensky. The May Day victory was on the 9th of May. It wasn't on the 8th of May. And then he comes out and goes, oh, well, the French have been celebrating the May Day victory in Europe on the 8th of May for 53 years. So what? That's the French. This is your Ukrainian history. That's French history. What's French history got to do with Ukrainian history and Russian history? Nothing. And they're trying to change the date. Like here in Australia, they want to change the date for Australia Day. There in America, they want to cancel everyone that was someone that was in slavery or some statue or some bullshit. You're trying to rewrite history. And the only people that rewrite history are the ones that don't accept history and the ones that on the left side of politics to create the narrative for themselves as well. So just be careful of what you're looking at, because they'll come out and promote it like, he's the hero of the world and he's this charismatic guy and everything like that. Bullshit, man. You're trying to cancel people. You're trying to cancel history. You can't change history. Who the hell do you think you are? You might be the leader of Ukraine, but you don't get to change the date of something that happened in history, whether you like it or you don't. Bad luck. So just be careful, folks, when you're going down that rabbit hole.
And I'd like to throw in one last quick comment on this too before we throw it to the next one. If we have that EMP event, or if the internet goes down for whatever reason, our lives will be changed overnight. And it will take only a matter of days for people to turn into savages. So, right. I mean, we talk. There have been studies about how long it would take, and basically within like 10 days, 20 days, you have complete chaos, complete societal breakdown. So, listen, having 200, 300 gallons of fresh bottled water in the house is not a bad idea. Okay, if you figure 1 gallon per day per person, plus you throw in another gallon for cooking. Okay, that's if you have 2 people in the household, that's 3 gallons a day. That's a lot of water. It's heavy. It takes up a lot of space. But listen, if you just have 60 days worth of fresh water, you're way ahead of most people. So anyway, for whatever it's worth, do some prepping. In addition to everything else we talk about. Anyway, just one man's opinion.
Get while the getting is good, ladies and gentlemen, because you don't want to be reacting when the panic starts. All right, let's shift gears to weaponized immigration. What have you got for us, Ed?
All right, here we go. Okay, so the issue of illegal immigration is bad enough on its face, right? But the truth is, immigration has been weaponized, right? So let's talk about it. Okay, so illegal immigration has been a problem for many years now, right? Not just in America, but also in many countries in Europe. But in the past couple of years, this issue has accelerated and gotten even worse. And now this week is going to be like the granddaddy of all surges, because Title 42 is due to expire this week. So without getting into a long discussion about what Title 42 is, this just suffice to say that it gave our officials a lot of ammunition, a lot of tools to turn away illegal immigrants. But that's expiring. Now, I'm going to cheat a little bit and share a video from the people at Redacted. They did a really good job explaining this topic. Now, I did edit it quite a bit to save time, but I think I've got the salient points in it. So let's watch this video, and then we'll talk about it afterward.
If you thought it was bad now, just wait until Tuesday when Title 42 runs out. The U.S.-funded invasion of America kicked into high gear this weekend. The videos are just unbelievable of all sorts of thousands of illegal migrants pouring into Texas. Over the past 24 hours, we've seen extraordinary videos and positions from politicians that make your jaw drop. Just go to New York City. Here's a map of New York City. Now, look at this map. What is the big green thing in the center of Manhattan? Anybody?
Central Park.
Central Park. Yeah, Central Park. See that giant? It's the largest. New York is saying, yes, send all your migrants here. We'll turn Central Park into a tent city so that this entire green space in the middle of your screen will be filled with tents. Here's a question. If tuberculosis is a concern, is that a communicable disease? TB, massively important and very, very dangerous. We'll get into that problem in a second. Many are calling what's happening at the U.S.-Mexico border a deliberate invasion of the United States, a well-orchestrated invasion. This isn't just like by chance. All of those countries that he was just talking about, Venezuela, Nicaragua, many of them have been specifically destabilized thanks to the United States intervention in those countries. Right, exactly. So the everyday buses by the hundreds are coming through the Darien Gap in Darien Province, Panama, at these U.S.-funded camps headed for the United States, tens of thousands. I mean, just look at these buses. These are filled. These are state-of-the-art buses, filled, just leaving Darien Gap in Panama and heading right there, filled with people that are coughing uncontrollably with tuberculosis, scabies, lice. And this isn't just like conspiracy theory. And this is the video that he shot the other night of these buses filled with immigrants, many of them coughing uncontrollably. And he calls them tubercubuses.
I mean, that sounds awful.
That's what they are. And they're coming right into the United States. He tweeted this the other day. He said, you know, good morning. While you slept, the occupation government, United States, was assembling its replacement army to kill you. These useful idiots will be disposed of later. Now comes your turn to experience genocide. So I asked Michael, and I sat down with him. I said, you know, we started by saying, can you explain what is exactly happening at the Darien Gap?
And actually, at the instantaneous rate of bus flow from Darien Gap is about 30 to 40 bus loads per day. That's increasing. But there are hundreds that are coming through when you start adding up, for instance, Guatemala, El Salvador, Mexico.
A weaponized migration. And this is happening not just in the United States, but it's happening all throughout Europe. It's happening on a number of places. So this isn't just happening in the United States. It's important for us as people of the world to understand what's happening to the United States and how it's being weaponized.
Well, they're weaponizing people against people.
Yeah, that's exactly what they're
awful.
doing. It's yes, it's exactly what they're doing. So who's paying for all these buses? Who's paying for these state-of-the-art buses? Who's paying the bus drivers?
United States. For instance, Mayorkas, Alexander, Mayorkas, the chief of Homeland Security, he just came down to that camp where those buses are coming out of. That's called San Vicente Camp, right? We are openly funding it. It's not hidden. Our flag is on tents inside that camp, and also at Las Blancas Camp, and also in Bajo Chiquito Village and Canan Membrillo Village. These actually 5 major camps. There's another one up near David, near Costa Rica. The United States is openly funding it, as is the European Union. Now, this is a very interesting question. Who's actually doing this and why? Clearly, the World Economic Forum, they're very open about it. It's right on their website, like Governor Greg Abbott from Texas. He's part of the World Economic Forum. People don't believe me. I say, stop, drop, roll. Web search, Greg Abbott, World Economic Forum. You'll see him on their website. There's his mug with his bio on the World Economic. None of this is hidden. It's right in your face, right? At the end of the day, who's funding all this? The United States government is clearly funding it. Mayorkas came down here with the Southcom commander, commanding general in April. The bottom line is our military is also involved in helping people get through, right? They're clearly involved.
The buses are carrying many diseases into the United States, including scabies, tuberculosis. And I asked Michael specifically about this. He's interviewed so many people. He's like literally seen these guys like scratching, itching like crazy.
Scabies is another very serious disease, and which is clearly spreading, not to mention multi-drug resistant tuberculosis, which is coming up Highway 1 every day on these buses right now. It's already all over the United States. Tuberculosis. Tuberculosis is one of the worst one of the worst diseases in all human history, right? It's up there with Black Death, yellow fever, smallpox. It's Mac Daddy, right? This is not Spanish flu. Spanish flu was bad, but Spanish flu was like an ultra cold, right? It killed tens of millions of people maybe, but it's nothing like tuberculosis. And there's other things coming up as well. Nobody is being screened.
No one's being screened for it. Hop on the bus. We don't care if you're coughing. Going to the United States. They don't want them to be protected. They certainly don't want, they would encourage this. They don't want them to be clean, safe, sanitized when they arrive in the United States. That's all part of the plan. So the weaponized migration is not just affecting the United States. You should pay attention and wake up. I mean, it's happening all through Europe. And all you need to do is look at how the World Economic Forum also uses it to take over different countries, weaponize it for what they're doing in the Netherlands, to take over farms, et cetera. It's happening all over the world. Which is the weaponized migration is affecting Panama, Colombia.
Okay, so I think we can safely conclude that this illegal immigration going on across the world isn't just about people seeking a better life. This is part of a grand plan, and that illegal migration is being weaponized by the powers to be. So let's bring Rob in and let's talk about it.
Stop, drop, roll. I'm not on fire, dude. But man, your country is on fire. It is burning to the ground. You're going to need some people there after the economy collapses, man, to be the zombies in the apocalypse. Like, they're from the movie, man, all those people.
Need someone to feed on, huh? Listen, trust me, that was like an 8-minute video, that presentation, which is, I try to keep it to 5 minutes or more. Trust me, I had like 2.5 hours worth of material to get. Yeah. So I left a lot on the table. There's a lot to this topic. But in the spirit of kind of boiling things down for people, listen, this is not just about poor people trying to find a better life. This is part of a grand scheme. Okay, there are forces at work here that most people are completely unaware of. And this is yet another one of these issues that we can circle back to the WEF. We can just follow the breadcrumbs and see who's who's behind all this. This is a worldwide effort to listen. These people, the global elites who want their one world government, they've got to take certain countries down a peg. Okay, and so how do you take America down a peg? How do you take France, Germany? How do you take the wealthy countries down a peg? You do whatever you can to impoverish them, and that's what I believe is going on. This is a concerted effort to impoverish the well-to-do countries, so that eventually we all end up on this. We look for help. We turn to that governing body who's that benevolent dictator who's there to look out for us, right? I mean, what do you think?
I love Redacted, folks. I'll put a link to Redacted down below as well. Make sure you get on their email list and follow them on Twitter and stuff. They are awesome. Clayton does a really good job. I find myself disagreeing with Clayton quite a bit, actually. But the thing that I like about disagreeing with him is it highlights how independent he actually is. If you don't know his background, I think I mentioned before, he used to be on Fox News. He worked in mainstream media. His missus is a producer in that as well. So they've been in the media space for a long time. And I feel like he's finally had, it's what's going to happen to Tucker Carlson as well. He's finally had the muzzle taken off and he's able to be independent. And you can't help but see the disgust in his face. And he's not disgusted by the immigration. He's disgusted by the whole thing. And it's not just one aspect. He's not like disgusted by the people and, they're sick and they have TB and all of those things. That's like really bad. He's disgusted that's actually allowed to go on. And he was quite right when he said, look at the buses. He's like very nuanced in what his observations are. Look at the buses. That's not like some rickety old bus coming down from Tijuana in Mexico. These are like state-of-the-art vehicles worth $500,000 each. And, where is that coming from? That's government funding. And then there you go. There's the flags of the UN, the US and the EU. Like what is going on here? So let me juxtapose this against the Australian immigration thing that's going on here. We all know that the world's population is in decline. It's opposite to what Bill Gates would have you think. It's not too many people on Earth. It's the population collapses of planet Earth, which is going to cause all sorts of problems. But you're not seeing the population growth there in your country, in the United States, as a good thing, because they're using it to do exactly what you said. They're using that type of immigration to actually bring you down 10 notches, not just one. And the way they do that is just by crushing you economically and financially. Here in Australia, they want to bring another 700,000 people here to Australia in the next 2 years. Now, that doesn't sound like a lot of people for a very big country, but we don't have the infrastructure to support it. We have really bad problems with housing here in Australia. There's a rental crisis. There's not enough places to rent. If there are places to rent, they're too expensive and people can't afford them. There's not enough jobs and blah, on and on and on. And then there's the health system, right? So the government has this idea of bringing more people to Australia to help Australia. And that's the juxtaposition, right? Is you're allowing immigration to happen in America, or the WEF is rather, and all of those freaks on the border and all those WEF more by Klaus Schwab and his evil cabal. Those people are trying to destroy a country. Here in Australia, the politicians are trying to help the country. It's the other way around. So we go about it in a very methodical way, is that we just process things a little bit faster. Everybody has to tick all the right boxes. You have to have qualifications. Everything is screened. It's all above board. And in many ways, it's a really good thing here in Australia. If we had the infrastructure to support it and we had jobs and medical systems to support it, it would be good. And I guess the government look at it and go, if we don't bring more people here to Australia, the brain drain that we suffer from and the collapse of our population is going to leave us in big trouble because we're not having enough children to support that. So we need to bring people from the outside here. And when they're immigrants, they tend to work hard. And if we set the conditions for them to make sure that they have a job, make sure that they have qualifications, make sure that we're not living off government support, then they'll contribute to the economy and they will solve the problem in real time for us. So I see where the government is coming from. And in my view, it's actually not a bad thing. So long as it doesn't overwhelm the country all at the same time and there's an even distribution of it, not 700,000 more people here in Sydney. Bloody hell, we can barely cope as it is. Like the infrastructure can't cope. Like it's a very measured and controlled response. And they're doing it for all the right reasons, for all of the noble reasons behind it. Your country's the complete opposite, man. That's like a basket case of what's going on there. It's scary.
Well, we do have a robust legal immigration process, right? We do want, now the idea behind bringing in immigrants to your country, whatever your country is, you want to bring in the best of the best, right? You want to bring in
labor.
Right. You want to bring in people who are going to contribute to the society, make the country better. So there is a screening process. I mean, it's going to sound harsh, but look, we want to screen out the dregs of society. We want to bring in the people who are going to benefit, the country. Now, in Australia, have you guys ever thought about, incentivizing your youngsters to have babies?
Yeah, the government pays you. And they
Really?
still do.
They do?
Yeah, they pay you quite a bit of money to do that. They implemented like paid maternity leave, and they also have paid paternity leave for men as well. So there's a lot of great incentives there for you to go and have more kids, but there's just not the population to sustain what we actually need. Every family has to have 5 children in order for us to continue down this path. And you can see where the government's coming from. The only solution that you have from a demographics perspective is you can't make families do that, and no incentive is going to help you. So you just need to bring more people in.
Well, maybe I should look into having my vasectomy reversed and apply for citizenship in
get the Australian.
Australia.
You can leech off the Australian government like every other freaking Westie out here with 10 kids in their family.
That'll be my skill. So what skill are you bringing?
Reproduction, man.
Yeah, there you go.
Reproduction is my skill.
Circling back to this immigration issue here. Now, the vast majority of our illegal migrants are coming from Central and South America. And now they are coming from other countries too. They're worming their way in. But the big supplier of all these illegal immigrants are all these socialist countries.
Yes.
And I was thinking about that a lot today. And I'm going to do a separate presentation pretty soon on this topic about socialism and the evils of socialism. But I've been thinking about it, in my downtime. Well, what are the arguments for socialism? And you know what? It occurred to me that these socialists, as much as they hate capitalism, they are really good at marketing. And
they are.
Right?
That's true.
and they've got the best marketing campaign you can think of. Free stuff. Free stuff. That's a pretty enticing, free stuff, free everything. Like Margaret Thatcher says, socialism works really well until you run out of other people's money.
Which is what's happened in South America, right? They let all the people out of the jails. Off you go, piss off, get out of here, don't come back. You don't have to be in jail anymore. Just go to America and go there. And the people are just sitting around doing nothing. It reduces the stress and the impact on the government. I'm sure it fixes their economy. It does a lot of really good things when people are leaving at scale, and they're getting the hell out of Dodge.
Well, so Guatemala, for example, their number one source of revenue is, take a guess, Rob.
Isn't it the sending money home?
Yep, remittances. Yeah,
remittances. Yeah. So I'm working in America and I send use some money back home like that, then they clip a ticket on the way there.
That's their number one source of revenue. So, and that's true with all these, including Mexico. So they're probably not really incentivized to stop the people from going to America, because it's a really good source of income.
Send more.
Yeah.
Send more. Let them go.
Everyone go. Everyone go. So that's a real issue now with freedom and capitalism. That's a little bit tougher sell, because when you're free, you got to get up. You got to work. You got to put yourself out. You got to take risks. Nothing's guaranteed. So it's a harder sell to a lot of people out there than everything's free. So, but freedom, but socialism, once you get past the buzzwords, it's misery. It leads to nothing but misery. And these people will protest all day long. They protest about this is bad, this is bad. But at election time, they'll still elect the socialists back into office.
Yeah, so, it's insane, isn't it? Marketing is so good.
Yeah, the marketing is good, and they know how to market it. So that's why but in America, we're seeing this too. Socialism has been sold really, really well. Bernie Sanders has his 3 houses. You got to hand it to these socialist guys. They love their perks. They love their luxury items, right? Bernie's having, they all, the big mouthpieces. These guys are living pretty high off the hog, but they're socialists, So I'm going to have a presentation pretty soon about that topic in general, about how socialism, about the evils of socialism, and I believe this whole subject of socialism is behind the WEF, the IMF, the World Bank, and all these and all of these policies that have come down from them that's destroying the world. Things like the climate change agendas. They package it up as it's good for humanity, and we're gonna clean this and clean that. And if you want to drive, if you don't want to drive an electric car, then you must be for a dirty, environment. You must be a fascist. That's the way they attack you. And anyway, so.
Well, that's it's a beautiful segue into the next, into the final segment of today's show. And thanks for putting that together for us, Ed. I know it's a hard thing to kind of boil all of that down. And when you start creating a report, or you start creating a video for something like this, it's very difficult and time consuming. So I appreciate all the effort and work you put in there. And it's very concise and helpful. So hopefully people are getting the information that they need from this. All right, folks, I'm going to play a little video for you about child slavery and how we're, here in Australia at least, we're using child slaves to reach net zero. This is something that's not spoken about ever. And as I mentioned earlier in the podcast, when you try and share the information on YouTube from other people about this, you get censored by YouTube. But this video that I've got is already live in YouTube and not censored. So the more that we can talk about this, the better it is. So let me play the video and we'll go for it. Video and show you how the government will do and say absolutely anything that they have to get your vote. They'll even go as far as using child slaves to win your favor and to make sure that they continue to perpetuate their narrative that they're the gods that can control the weather. Now, let's begin with an opening statement, shall we? This is from the Federal Environment Minister, Chris Bowen. Now, let me be clear here, folks. I'm not cherry picking anything that this guy's saying. What I'm doing is showing you how these politicians act and how they'll say and do anything to win your favor. In fact, what he says here in this little clip is actually pretty good, and it's what you would want an elected official to say and to do.
Today, the Albanese government struck an arrangement across the Parliament to ensure our legislation has passage through the Parliament tomorrow. This is the Government of Australia acting in the national interest, working as a good government does, across the aisle with people of good faith and goodwill for a good outcome. That is what this government sets out to do, and it's what we deliver.
There's just one sinister thing behind all of this radical green socialist policy that this man strategically forgets and leaves out all the time. He forgets to tell you that in order to achieve his green utopian future, we need to get ourselves some child slaves to do the work for us.
Is ordered to retrieve the sack he's forgotten. There's an urgency now. The rains make this dangerous work even more risky, and Dorsan's told in no uncertain terms he risks a beating if he messes up again. Dorsan, with Richard beside him, have worked all day. They're 8 and 11 years old. Even this punishing work doesn't guarantee enough for food. Dorsan hasn't eaten for 2 days now. This is what helpless looks like, and he's one of the children making millions for multinational corporations in America and China whilst they suffer in squalor.
We all know that governments all around the world are adding battery technology into their mix of dispatchable energy, especially for renewables like wind and solar, and that makes sense. In fact, here in Australia, there are literally hundreds of millions of dollars worth of projects that have been rolled out to do with battery technology. And they're trying to plug the gaps that are being left by the coal-fired power stations that are being systematically shut down. And we need that dispatchable energy as well, and we need to store that renewable energy somewhere as well. There's one big thing that the government has missed out when creating all of those policies. At no stage has anybody from the government ever mentioned that they're planning on using slaves to do the work to get us the ingredients that we need for those batteries. They never mention any of that for some reason. To Chris Bowen, batteries are a natural part of getting to net zero, whatever that is, but he continuously forgets to mention the part about the slaves. What the government is doing here is deliberately misleading you. They simply leave out the fact that getting to net zero or whatever with their fancy batteries and all their storage technology will require the use of child slaves to get there. They also leave out that to keep the charade going, we're probably going to have to enslave generations of people to keep the cobalt coming so we can keep the ruse going. Now let's take a quick look at the government's policy on electric vehicles. Now, they want us to have 50% of new cars to be zero emissions by 2030 and 100% of cars to be zero emissions by 2036. Now, that's an ambitious target to be sure, but the problem is that the only zero emission choice that we have at the moment is an electric car. And none of the cars that we can buy here in Australia come from Australia, and none of the batteries that go in those cars can be verified with cobalt in them that doesn't come from the Congo. Again, Chris Bowen is failing to tell us any of that. And he just leaves out the fact that in order for Australia to reach this imaginary net zero target, we'll need to use child slaves to get there. There's absolutely no mention of enslaved children or women or men in any of the government documents or any of his press conferences. I don't know why that is. It seems really strange to me, but that's exactly how he intends on achieving these ambitious targets, with hundreds of millions of our taxpayer dollars spent on batteries that contain cobalt mined by small children. As you know, cobalt is the key ingredient in every rechargeable lithium battery. It means that if the batteries used here in Australia come from somewhere else, meaning they're not from Australia, the cobalt that goes into those batteries would likely come from the Congo, which means we're using child slaves to get the job of greening Australia done. Now, I want to sum up by saying that the narrative that you're perpetuating, if you're supporting this green ideology, is child slavery. It's not a greener planet with less impact for humanity. If you support Chris Bowen, net zero, electric vehicles, and this ridiculous battery-driven technology, then you're a supporter of child slavery. It's that simple. There's no grey area here, folks. 72% of the world's cobalt comes from the Congo, and almost all of the battery tech that we need comes from China. There's no in-between here. Unless the cobalt comes from somewhere that is not the Congo, and you have no way of knowing that, then it's coming from slaves. All you have to do is look at YouTube for about 20 seconds and search for cobalt mines in the Congo, and you'll see for yourself exactly what you're supporting. I'll put a couple of links down below from some older docos and then some newer ones, and you'll see that not much has changed in about 5 or 6 years. Let me finish by reminding you that there is no such thing as free, renewable, and sustainable energy. No such definition exists, nor will it ever. Nothing is free. Nothing. If you don't support child slavery, then stop supporting Chris Bowen and the foolish climate zealots that follow him. These people are so arrogant that they'll make you think that they can control the weather with a government policy.
But to do that, they're going to need some help from a few 100,000 slaves in the Congo.
The unspoken truth.
The unspoken truth. Net zero means slaves.
Net zero means willfully ignorant.
You look at, like, you constantly hear this argument that, oh, we need all these wind turbines and solar panels and the pollution that it creates. And then the government throws up some strange, like, org chart or document to show you how they recycle these things. Okay, cool. Let me give you the benefit of the doubt that there's like 100 people in the background in government bureaucracy who have figured out how to recycle all of this stuff and fix the catastrophe that this actually is. So I'll give you the benefit of the doubt, no problem. But okay, so how do we get all of the minerals, the rare earth minerals that we need to actually go into these things? Oh yeah, we'll just use some kids to dig it out of the ground for us. Fuck it, that'll do. Like no one will know, no one will look, no one will see any of that. Folks, I'll put a link down below to a couple of interviews. I'll put a link down below to the interview. So the footage that you saw in there of the cobalt mines came from the guy who wrote the book called Cobalt Red. And he does an interview with Joe Rogan. And in about 5 minutes, that was the content that I couldn't use. In about 5 minutes of that interview, you will see exactly how the world is benefiting from slavery. And at no time in history have more people perpetuated slavery or benefited from slavery than now. And all of us are doing it. I've got an iPad, about 4 computers in here. I've got like probably 5 or 6 phones in here that all have got cobalt in them. All of them. I'm perpetuating slavery as well. You know, and if I had a choice of getting this from somewhere else, I would. But the problem is that the companies that supply the equipment that we use get their batteries from China, and China are the ones that have got their hooks into the Congo, and that's where all the batteries come from. Here in Australia, we have, I think the metric was 23% of the world's cobalt, but we only supply 4% of the world's cobalt to the world. But here in Australia, we could be a world leader in cobalt technology, and we could do that. But the problem that we have is the cost of production and doing it here is too high because the cost of energy here in Australia is too high. It's this paradox that we suffer from and this place that we end up in, which is really strange. Anyway, folks, I just wanted to share that with you, and I wanted to close out today's show with a little bit of hypocrisy. Well, it's not hypocrisy. It's saying the unspoken truth. We're saying the quiet part out aloud. If I had the opportunity to speak to Chris Bowen and say to him, you know, all of this net zero stuff is really good, and I love what you're doing, you know, trying to incentivize Australia to become a green energy superpower. I think they're all good things. I think what your intention is good, but your execution leaves out the fact that in order to get there, you're actually harming the environment way more than you're helping, because in order to get all of the solar panels, you're outsourcing all of that production to China and all of the pollution in China to build the wind turbines. Again, that's coming from somewhere else where they don't have the same rules as what we do. So you're pretending like we've got these amazing green credentials and these green metrics, but what you're not factoring in is where all of that stuff comes from. And if you take all of the negative metrics of where that comes from and you overlay that into what we've got here, what you're going to find is there's going to be a net increase in our output of pollution and our output of carbon dioxide and our output of all the bad things that you're trying to get rid of. The cure that you've got is worse than the disease. And the reason that you won't acknowledge that is because of the ideology. And you have a socialist ideology that you're selling to us that it's going to be a green utopian world. And hopefully you're right. I hope you're right. But the reality is you're not. And the reality on the ground is very, very different. And the strange thing is, by the time that your solar farm actually starts to make money and your wind farm starts to make money, by the time that happens, your equipment is obsolete, needs to be recycled and replaced. And the battery technology happens faster. So if you look at the curve, you know, we talk about the inverse relationship between the bond returns and the interest rates. The curve of how much cobalt you need versus how much pollution that creates and versus how much slavery that creates, these things don't marry up. And the demand for cobalt, the demand for rechargeable batteries is only increasing, but it's increasing not just a little bit. It's like a hockey stick of exponential growth. And so all you're doing is perpetuating the slavery. All you're doing is perpetuating the misery. But at what, and you're pretending like, hey, look, we're at net zero. But what about what you did over there? And what about the pollution over there? What about the recycling there? What about? Like, there's 50 things against you and one thing for you. And the only thing that you see is the ideology. And I don't know, that's a socialist thing. You know, what's the solution to that? There is no solution. The solution is to find other battery technology. There's a bunch of battery technology that's been worked on related to salt and salt water. And some really good stuff that's actually happening, but the commercialization of it is not quite there. But if we can solve that problem of cobalt and then get to a place where we have dispatchable energy in the form of batteries that doesn't rely on lithium or cobalt, then yeah, man, I'm all for it. That's a pretty good thing. Why aren't we dedicating hundreds of millions of dollars into research into that? I'm sure we could solve that problem if we did that, because there's really smart people working on it already.
Yeah, well done, Rob. That's a very important topic, and I'm really glad you brought it up because nobody is talking about it. So good for you. Yeah, regarding these cobalt mines and this slave labor that's going on, I'm not so sure. I'm skeptical that if we found a better technology to replace the current lithium cobalt battery issue, whether that would solve the issue going on in with child slavery, because in the Congo, for me, it's an issue of poverty, because whether it's cobalt or whether it's something else, people are going to find a way to exploit these people. So it'll just be another source of misery for whatever it is. So the issue, I think, the bigger issue is solving the issue of poverty and the.
But hold on, you're 100,000 million% correct about poverty. But the only thing that drags countries like Congo out of poverty like that, and it's proven throughout history, is cheap, reliable energy. And the only cheap, reliable energy that we have is coal and gas and nuclear. If you want to go down that route, put nuclear aside for a second, because that's not cheap and it takes a long time to build that. But to build a coal-fired power plant is cheap. Those places in the Congo, when you watch those reports, they don't have energy. There's no power lines running through their towns. They live on dung and wood, and it's like living in the 1700s for these people. They've never even seen a freaking smartphone, never mind an electric car.
Well, then how about the IMF and the World Bank and the WF come up with a master plan to solve that problem for them? These people are supposed to be geniuses. And if their mission is to save the world, well, there's a really good project for you. Why don't we find a way of getting cheap energy to people in the Congo?
That's the hypocrisy. That's the hypocrisy of it all. And that's the irony of it all, is that the greenies here in Australia want to turn off coal-fired power, right? And they want every other country in the world to turn off coal-fired power as well. But Australia and all developed Western countries got to the point in economic history and economic stability and society because of cheap, reliable energy. So you want us to turn all of that off and go to renewables. All right, go for a second and say that it actually works. Okay, renewables are working. Fast forward 30 years into the future, it's working like gangbusters. So what about all of the countries like the DRC and like all of those African nations and Asian nations who have not yet developed to a point economically as we have today? And they're not allowed to use coal or fossil fuels to get to there. So what you're essentially saying is that because we've reached this point in our society, we're now able to move to new energy sources and new ways of doing it. But every other third world country in the world that hasn't reached economic development the same as us, bad luck, you stay where you are.
Yeah.
So that's essentially what they're saying.
Nope, that's right. That's the rich countries. We want to put impositions on the poor countries to use coal and to use those cheap sources of energy that we used to get rich. Now they want to do it.
Unbelievable.
It is.
Unbelievable. So once again, that socialist ideology and that
Yep.
green ideology clouds the judgment of all of these people. Just because you can't see them and you don't know them and you don't speak their language, it doesn't mean they don't have the same rights as us.
Mhm.
They have the right to cheap energy as well as much as we do. They have the right to economic prosperity and development and growth of their country and their families the same as we do. Wouldn't you want what you had for your family, for that little boy in the Congo? Yes.
Look, where are the human rights people at the UN screaming about this? Where are they?
Well, that's what Susie was saying to me yesterday. The reason that your video was censored, not because you couldn't use that Joe Rogan content, but because you're talking about a subject that could potentially go viral. And if that subject goes viral, that'll go against the narrative of everything that's there. So the minute that you start talking about that word cobalt and you're talking about mines in the Congo, the algorithm's flagging you going, no, you don't. So that's why we have to have these conversations. That's why we have to say that, because we can't be censored. They're not going to stop us from doing that. But from using someone like Joe Rogan's content and talking about that, that will go viral because he's got a massive, massive audience. So that's what it is. It's going against the narrative.
So
well, let's wrap up
So please, everybody, hit that subscribe button and hit the like button to make us, less likely to be censored. Please give us your support and hit that like button.
You got to get that unspoken truth from somewhere. Ladies and gentlemen, we talked about a lot of different links, and all of the links will be in the show notes down below. If you're listening to this as a podcast, just take a little peek at your phone and you will see all of the links there as well. Don't forget, you can also follow Ed's YouTube channel, and the link for that is down in the show notes as well. It's just at HeyEd7496. So make sure you pop on over to his channel, say good day. He's got a lot of great content over there. He's continuously sounding the alarm about the financial system and how you can get yourself and limit your exposure from the banks, get yourself some gold and silver, and get yourself some passive recurring income. He's got some great programs over there that you should check out. So make sure you pop on over. Folks, if you're not following us on Spotify, Telegram and Rumble, please have a look at the links in the description below. We have those as the backup and the secondary. And make sure you check out the podcast as well. Just search for The Unspoken Truth on your favorite podcasting app, and you can follow along when you can't watch us here on YouTube. Ed, have you got any closing comments for today's show, mate?
Yeah, just so everyone knows, we are planning on doing a live episode tomorrow. So if you're watching this video in time, Rob, you want to give the details on that?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, once you're subscribed to the channel, as soon as we go live, you'll get that notification, and we'll be doing today's show live as you see it. So I'm looking forward to doing that because it means no editing for me.
Yeah.
Looking forward to bringing that to everybody. All right, let's wrap up today's show. We'll see you tomorrow on the live, Ed. Bye for now, mate.
See you, Robbie.